So in this exam, you're going to send this to me as a package. Please do not send me journal entry number 1 today and then journal entry number 2 on Wednesday. It log jams the grading process and it makes it difficult for me to keep up if you have 2 exam submissions or 1 exam submission. So when I say here, submit this as one package, what I mean is you're going to send me one PDF. Do not send me a link to your Google Drive. Let me just go ahead and put that in there, okay? Please do not send a link to Google Drive. And the reason why is I want a finished exam in an archivable way that's in a PDF format, all right? And you have other options of how you can send that as well. We're going to go into that in a minute. So the date it's assigned is today. The soft deadline is going to be on Wednesday by midnight, right before midnight, like a minute before midnight. So if you get that in, then I'll add the extra credit in. Let me just put that in there. Plus 5 points for time management. All right. And then the hard deadline is going to be on August 3rd. Now listen, y'all, I could have made the deadline Friday evening. All right, but I didn't. I gave you the weekend to work on it. So after this point, I cannot accept late work. And this is 20% of your grade, which means that if you miss this, then it's going to end up result in you making a B in the overall class score if you have made an A on everything else. So make sure that you complete this assignment by the deadline, because I'm under a deadline and I always meet my deadlines. Usually I beat my deadlines. Your task is to write journal entries, one for each of the 2 days of lecture. This means 2 journal entries. Do you notice how I'm making corrections as I'm speaking this? This is kind of why we were talking about how important it is to practice your speeches, because oftentimes things come across a little bit differently when you say it verbally than when you read it. So whenever you guys give a speech in the future, just make sure that you rehearse it, because you're going to make changes just like I'm doing right now. Now you have 2 different options, and you can mix these up within one journal entry. You could have one journal entry this approach, and you can have a different journal entry this approach. I'm just giving you some launching points. So don't take this too literally, and use the flexibility that I've given you to create something that's very unique of your takeaways from this class. Approach number 1, explain and describe what you learned from each unit and how you can apply that in future communication contexts. You may focus on any of these launching points. Your interaction with your friends and family. Or you can talk about communication episodes or scenarios that you've experienced. Maybe like when I talk about creative endeavors, some of you may have been in like a band. I have actually a lot of veterans that I teach over the course of many years. So y'all have had like life and death communication scenarios, right? Some of you have workforce context. You work a job right now, or maybe you're in an internship. Some of you may be involved in politics at the local level or maybe national politics. Others of you may volunteer at your church or some sort of social service agency. Or some of you really may like watching TV shows or movies. You're like, film critics, novice film critics. Any of these are fair game to apply the lecture material to these different subsets of how you can approach the lecture material and apply that to these specific sorts of contexts. The second approach is aligned with what you guys did in quite frankly, with exam 1. And it also is what you guys did with your communication conflict assignment, or you took a communication studies term and you defined it. And then obviously you also gave a paraphrase. Remember that? The what this means? And I see some of you shaking your head, which I appreciate. You broke it down in your own words, right? All right, so there you go. And then you applied those. So usually in the other assignments, this was the A, this was the B, and then this was the thing. But I'm just going to kind of own what I have here and just give that little extrapolation. And then I'm just going to like bold this, just because this is more aligned with what you did and I don't want to create any confusion. And then you can apply those to your current, past, or future communication episodes. So this is a journal. This is not you regurgitating back lecture material to me. This is really your personal analysis of the lecture material today. You may type or write the journal entry. So in other words, if you want, you can, let me see here. If you want, what you could do is type it up, send it to me as a PDF, or you can handwrite it out and send it to me as a JPEG or a PDF. All right. The other option is that, and this should be as a PDF. Let me just say this. Google. Whoops. Okay. You could attend office hours and present that verbally. Then the next opportunity is to give a video or a podcast. It could be one or the other. It could be an audio podcast or it could be a video. When selecting this option, ensure that the audio or video file is uploaded to your Google Drive and that I can open it. If I get a link, kind of like when we're in class and I say I need access, if I need access, then you're going to go down to the bottom of the queue and I'm going to continue grading the order I receive it. So make sure you open it up for me to be able to access that document, okay, or that piece of multimedia. All right. Now, the submission, the entry should be a minimum of 20 sentences. I don't go by page lengths because different people like different spacing, different font typography, different points, quite frankly, of the font. So I'm looking more for the internal logic of what you're presenting as a cohesive journal entry, and then email it as a PDF. Okay, so email, I'm going to say typed or handwritten journal entries as a PDF attachment in one package, which what this means is do not send them to me as separate journal entries. Now, if you outline your book chapters, and what I mean by this is not like you do Roman numeral 1A. It's literally in my brain, what that means is that you're a kinesthetic learner and you are writing out as you read what you're glimmering, your takeaways, the aha moments from that reading in your own style. It could be a bunch of bullets, it could be the Cornell style, it could be some sort of like graphic depiction, you know, like you're just making circles and lines, whatever your brain likes, and you're writing out as you go. The other thing is I've got some video critiques here that you could use as extra credit as well. And I've got the max point values here. All right. So then here are your resources. Here's how I've partitioned the exams. Journal entry number 1 themes are in these lectures that I'm going to cover today. Journal entry number 2 themes are right here, what I'm going to cover. So I took the lecture material from the course syllabus and I divided them up into 2 days. And so that's what we're about to do. And then you've got some resources to unpack that in the form of the playlist. These are the chapters from the text. All right. And you can kind of see how they're aligned. So you've got, in fact, these two here would go, let me just put that here for you, text, boom. And then these two here would go here, text, whoops, boom. And then we've got this stuff here which would go here. Okay, so it's kind of, and I'm just going to highlight this in purple, so maybe that will help your brain understand this stuff here. It's referenced above. Let me just say that. This is just more like the dump of information, and here's how it plays in. And it's very flexible. If you want to use approach 1 for exam 1 and 2, go for it. If you want to use approach 2 for exam 1 and approach 1 for exam 2, go for it. If you want to mix up both approach 1 and approach 2 in exam 1 and 2, go for it. It's very open-ended. I'm wanting your reflection. You can weave in the textbook. A lot of people like to do that with the lecture. If there's something you want to focus on in the lecture, you can definitely do that. Please at least devote 5 sentences to this video. And I'm going to put this in red. This is very important. Please note, and I'm going to make it big. I want to make sure that you're covering this. And so make sure if you haven't watched this, that you watch this and devote at least 5 sentences of your analysis to this. Okay. And this is a riveting video. It's a before after scenario. And I believe I gave the caveat in the announcement. You can reference to here that the children were not harmed long term after participating in this activity. You're going to be really upset when you first start watching this video. And that's why I always give that caveat that these children as adults say this changed their life for the better. It made them better citizens, more empathic individuals, and it changed their perspective on race. And so, and I got pissed off when I saw it the first time. I'm like, what are they making me watch? And then when I finished watching the video, and you only have to watch the first 2 sections, a lot of my students watch the entire video. So I just want to reiterate that caveat. So let's jump into the communication model. Can you guys see the communication model right now? Can y'all see this? Okay, very good. Let's see here. So in my discipline, there are a variety of different dimensions. You've got intrapersonal communication, which is your internal dialogue about whatever's about to happen. Have you ever had just a bad day? Like maybe a lot of people are super stressed out right now because it's finals. Like I can feel I'm pretty intuitive and I could feel the pressure right now. It's finals and I'm like, whoa, I'm the chill professor, right? But people are stressed out. Maybe you've got to go to work after class. Maybe you've got some family commitments and it's really hard to focus on this lecture. That would be intrapersonal. It's that internal dialogue. It's kind of like when you gave your speech, and were you confident about your speech? Were you ready to rock and roll, or were you just like, I don't want to do this? And if you had the latter perspective, it's probably going to impact your performance. I've been taking some different classes online, and one thing I'm learning is about performance, peak performance for athletes, is that your mindset has everything to do with it. And something I learned in one of these classes I'm taking is usually the more skilled, higher performing individuals feel the nerves more. Isn't that interesting? It was such a aha moment for me when I watched this video lecture from my instructor. I was like, really? So if you're a higher performer, you're going to feel it more. Okay, so think about that. And that adrenaline is there to help you. It's in our DNA from when we used to run away from the dinosaurs. And y'all know I live on an archaeological site. So literally, there were people running from the mammoths. I've got a mammoth tooth here right in one of these boxes next to me, literally running from those dinosaurs, right? And so the higher the performer you are, you're going to feel it. So you have to remind yourself, hey, this is to help me push through. All right, that's what that adrenaline is for. So it's just something I learned just like 2 weeks ago. I wanted to share with you, and I wish I had learned it previous to teaching that public speaking unit. Now it's a takeaway for me in my discipline. Interpersonal communication, that's that communication conflict assignment that y'all did, the one-to-one where you created that argument between 2 different people, right? And it's a much different dynamic than small group or team building. 5 to 7 people is communication in like a team building situation. So communication that's group or team building is 5 to 7 people. And then interpersonal is one-to-one communication. Public speaking is the one to the many. You could be talking from one person speaking to 30 people. I've spoken to audiences of well over 500 people. And it's a much different situation, right? Because I've got a microphone, I'm at a podium, I may not be able to walk around. If I do, I got to grab the mic and hope I don't trip over the coax cord connecting the mic to the PA system. It's a much different situation than if you're in a small little context of speaking where you can literally walk around and not worry about that microphone. All you have to do is projecting your voice. The nonverbal communication is much different when you're at a podium. Now, if you're at a podium on the television, you're not going to be using the big hand gestures, right? Versus if you are not on TV, then the hand gestures will probably be a little bit more bold. So that's something else you would want to think about. How are you going to move your microphone around and all that. So then you have mass communication. That's things like radio, television, film, periodicals like a magazine or a newspaper. And then now we have social media, which was not around when I was sitting in your chair as a student. It wasn't even invented yet. So now, I know a bunch of y'all probably watch some video bloggers that just go viral. Any of y'all watch a video blogger where you're sitting there watching it, you just watch it because like 1,000 people watching, 2,000 people watching, 10 minutes into it, 45,000 people are watching. I don't know if any of you guys watch political commentary, but the ones I watch, it's like suddenly there's 72,000 people watching this live broadcast, and they're engaging in the chat, that kind of thing. So, fun fact, yesterday there was a ham radio one, and they were doing QRP, which is low watt. And so I jumped on my ham radio. I was watching it, and I was like, I'm going to jump on. I jumped on, and they said the YL, which means the young lady. It's a way to say a female ham radio operator, basically. We don't take offense when they say young lady. I know they mean the woman ham radio operator. And they pulled me out of the signal, and they said, okay. And I felt really cool because some of the guys didn't know how to lower the watts on their radio. And they're like, okay, what are you at? I'm at 20 watts. They said, okay, take it down to 10. I said, no problem. Took it down to 10 watts. I got my radio down to 5 watts, and they could still hear me. And I was giving them signal reports, and I was real flashy about it. They're like, I said, it's a 5-5, it's a double nickel. And I know they thought that was fun because it's like, if you can say a double nickel, then they know you're an experienced ham radio operator. They said, take it down to 3 watts. And I said, hold on. I said, I'm kind of nervous because I knew it was a live stream. And I actually couldn't get it down to 5 watts because my Yaesu doesn't go down lower than 5 watts. Then I was telling what 10 I was running. It was a really neat experience for me to just jump on my radio and do a live stream, and to be the only lady in the bunch doing it, and then talk about my new antenna that's like literally outside my window, like not even 6 feet off the ground. So social media is I've noticed it can be very toxic or it can be very empowering. I think it just depends upon the focus. So that's just a new division within all of these ways that we partition our discipline. The next situation I want to talk about is the communication model. Now, when you guys walk into a chemistry class, what do you see on the around the wall? What is pasted around the wall? Anytime you've ever walked into a chemistry class, what is all over the wall? Yes, thank you. The periodic table of elements. It's the basic building blocks of that discipline. And this is ours. We're super like low key about it. We've just got like 7, right? I don't know, maybe I've partitioned it more. You've got the source or the sender. That's the person that originates the communication event. Okay, so if I start off like a text message, or maybe I make a YouTube video, I'm the source. If you drop in an idea in the chat of my live stream, you're now the receiver. Okay, and you're giving me feedback, and I'm going to give you some more examples in a minute. If I send that text message, when you receive that text message, you're the receiver. When you reply to me, you're giving me the feedback. Now, sometimes our feedback is verbal, sometimes it's nonverbal. So if I say, If I like put my head down, or if I'm talking to you and you're playing on your phone, that's feedback, even though you're not engaged with me. That's a different type of feedback. It may not be positive feedback, but it's feedback nonetheless. If you go, good job, I'm giving you verbal feedback with my voice, and then the nonverbal is clapping my hands. All right. So that's the source, the sender, and then the speaker. I like to take all the different disciplines. I mean, the trajectory of my discipline, and use all the words. So when I was going to school, they probably called it the source, and now they may call it the speaker. It depends also which class you're taking. So I like to throw them all in here, kind of like I did with the group communication one, where it was like negative role and now it's individual role, just to give you the whole gamut of the different time frames of my discipline. The message can be verbal or nonverbal. It could be like me talking, and then it could also me giving you a thumbs up. Now, if I say, way to go, or I say, way to go, the way that I say that, the way to go, or the way to go, that's actually nonverbal, because it's how I'm using my voice. The words way to go are the verbal element. So the message can be verbal or nonverbal. I want to make that really clear. If you give eye contact and you go, yeah, that's nonverbal feedback. If I go, yeah, that's the verbal. It's the words that I'm using. Hey, Atlas, how's it going today? It looks like I spelled channel wrong, which I always do. Channel is how you're going to transmit it. So is it via a text message? Is it via an email? Are you having a Zoom conference call? Are you jumping on the phone? Is it a live stream on Zoom? Okay. And then or are you having a personal meeting with someone at a coffee shop, or are you going to have it very formal in an office? Okay. Noise is anything that impedes the listener's ability to understand the speaker. So if you've got a headache, and my allergy folks, you know how that goes. You got, maybe, you can't breathe, or you're all stuffy, you've got a headache, maybe you're hungry, maybe you're worried about your bills, whatever those things going on that impedes your ability to listen to the speaker, that's noise. That's something the receiver or the listener is trying to work through in order to focus on the speaker and his or her message. All right. Now, encoding is what you do. And a lot of y'all who speak different languages, you know how this works. You speak multiple languages and you're like, how am I going to say this in English? Or how am I going to say this in my native language? Or how can I do both, right? Sometimes you may speak two languages in your household. That's what encoding is. How am I going to take my feelings and my thoughts and put that into a cohesive message? And in some cultures, you're going to do it a little bit differently. Some cultures, there may be a lot of eye contact. In America, we tend to expect that. In other cultures, it's very rude to address your elders with direct eye contact. So you're going to have to make that choice. And I see some people being affirming, and I appreciate that, right? So it's much different. And our international students are having to navigate that. Am I going to look my grandmother in the eye? Probably not, if I'm from a different culture, a high context culture, which we'll cover in tomorrow. In this culture, it's expected you look someone right in the eye. So there's a lot of navigating that we do as speakers, as communication scholars, when we're communicating with other people. Decoding is interpreting that message. So if I say, come here, okay, is she having a hard day? Is that just how she talks? Is she being facetious, or is she upset? Right? It's the same thing. You've done that with your animals. Those of you who are animal lovers, come here versus come here, right? They're interpreting that also. So they're decoding that. You're breaking down the verbal and the nonverbal message, and you're assigning meaning to that message. And y'all know how text messaging works. A lot of times there's confusion. That's why I'm like, yo, let's just pick up the phone and have this conversation. Like, I'm the world's worst texter. I'm the product of the 80s, where we would have to pull over to the side of the road and put a quarter, maybe 35 cents in a payphone and have a conversation. And that's why we have the cameras on this class, right? I'm assessing if you're understanding it, what your feedback is. Do I need to elaborate? I'm looking at your facial channels, right? right? I'm looking at your body language. I'm listening to the intonation and how you're using your voice, the vocalics. I can't do that if I get 5 words in a text. I do not like, I'm very anti-texting. I'm not a big texter. And I feel really pressured to respond, and I don't like that. I mean, I sometimes I feel I can get more out in like a 3-minute phone conversation than a 15-minute going back and forth through email and text messages. Context is, where is this happening? Is this happening at a restaurant? Is this happening at a formal occasion? Are we having this conversation at some sort of like an opening ceremony, or are we having this just like in an office somewhere planning it? Like there's a lot of different ways that we conduct ourselves based on how the formality of the event. So we've talked about source, receiver, message, channel, noise, encoding to context. I think that's all of them. Talk about feedback, right? Like there's this. Remember when Brian banged his arms on the table when she said that he was part of the lower group? Remember when he did that, and then he started like cussing at her? You couldn't tell what he was saying, but he was mouthing cuss words. Remember when he did that? Or remember when the girls were outside in the snow and they were looking down all defeated? Right? Or remember when the one kid punched the other kid? That's a form of feedback. That's violent, right? So you could talk about all that. You could talk about the way the teacher was talking to the students. Remember how she was super chill at the beginning of class? And then suddenly she like morphs into this. You're like, what is going on? And these kids are like, whoa, this is not the teacher I knew about 5 minutes ago. So you could talk about all that. You could talk about the message she crafted and the parameters she made for her message. You could talk about how the kids decoded it. Some of them are like, I'm not. Remember Brian? He's like, oh no, I'm not inferior. I loved Brian. He was like the little rebel. He's like, no, you're not gonna gaslight me, lady, right? And the other ones are like, taking that. Does that kind of confirm it, Mr. Reyes? Or you can give your reflection. You can just say, hey, listen, this would never fly in a classroom today, right? Or you could say, wow, I noticed it was 3.5 minutes versus like 2.5 minutes. And you could do the breakdown of the differential between day 1 and day 2 when they did that phonics exercise. You could talk about, hey, this reminds me a lot of what I've seen in historical situation, because she did this as a result of trying to understand how that could have happened during Nazi Germany times, right? Like that's why she did it. Like how do we get people to do what they want and create this mass social mentality where people will do whatever you want them to do versus like people just revolting against it? So it could be your personal opinion on it, or you can apply it to any of those ideas. Noise is anything that interferes with the ability of the listener to understand the speaker. So when the sender is sending a message to the receiver, it impedes their ability to comprehend the message. So, for example, there's internal and external factors that impede. Let me shut my cell phone off. I'm getting messages all of a sudden now. So for example, you may you like me right now. I'm hungry, y'all. Right? So sometimes I may be a little slower on the draw to answer a question because I literally have what I would call physiological noise. Right? I'm hungry. I didn't eat my breakfast yet, right? I got caught up in emails again. So, or you may be worried about your work. You got like, man, I got to get to work after this class. I got to roll, right? Or I've got that exam coming up and I don't know how I'm going to knock out all these exams. All right. So there's some examples here of physical noise, psychological noise, physiological noise, and semantic noise. Physical noise is I'm talking to you and the sunlight is shining in your eye and you can't hear me. I mean, you can't see me. Does that make sense? Or I'm trying to talk to you, and in the background, there's a train going on, and you can't hear me because, like in San Marcos, there's trains all the time. Maybe I'm over there by the big HEB or at the health food store I go to, and I'm standing outside talking to someone. All of a sudden, the train goes by, and it's like literally, I don't know, a quarter of a mile away. You can't hear me, or I can't hear you because of the noise of the train. That's external. Psychological is this next one. That is, you're worried about something. I think I'm recording. You're worried about something and it's mental interference. I got to run to the bank. I got to go get something to eat, right? You're not focusing on the actual speaker. Then we have physiological noise. This is something to do with your body. I've had friends. I used to work with this guy who was so cool. He's like a baseball coach, and he's the facility manager at an institution I used to work for. And he was the sweetest, coolest guy. I just really loved his. We used to talk through the office like the wall. He was like so cool. But he would get migraines, and he would have to shut his lights off and sit in his office. He could not focus. He couldn't do his job because he was in so much pain. Any of you have ever had a migraine, you know how that is, or maybe you've got allergies and you're all stuffed up and you can't breathe, and it's just like you're miserable. And maybe that makes you grumpy because you can't breathe, or it impedes your ability to think because you can't breathe. That would be physiological noise. Semantic noise is noise based on words. So in other words, if you and there's no shared meaning. So in other words, if I'm a doctor and you're like a 5-year-old, and I start using all these, doctoral, I don't know, medical school level terms to talk about what's going on with your ankle, you're not going to understand me. Versus if I break it down in a language that's user friendly to you, and a lot of you did this with your speeches. You gave us an operational definition of your topic. You defined the key areas of your topic, right? You told us. So when I had a student one time give a speech on canned hunting, it gave us a breakdown of what canned hunting is. She defined it for us. It means you take these wild animals, you bottle feed them, you take these wild animals, you make them domesticated, and then these big game hunters come out and they hunt them. It's really not a fair fight, right? Because these are domesticated animals used to being bottle fed. They're not wild anymore. They like humans. And now you have a big game hunter, and she was a hunter, and she was like so anti canned hunting. I was like, what's canned hunting? You go out and you pull out some cans and go shoot at the range. Like, I don't know what canned hunting is. And she gave me that operational definition as an audience member when she gave that speech to the class. As an audience member, now I know, now I understand what canned hunting is. All right. Or if you're talking about genetically GMOs, well, what does GMO mean? Genetically modified organism. What is that? So you need to break it down. So, and then another way semantic noise could be is if someone says something offensive and you're just going to shut down. All of us have different reactions when things are offensive. Sometimes we shut down. Sometimes we're going to get into an argument, right? Sometimes we're just going to walk away. So if they're using words that you find offensive, that would be semantic noise. Or if they use highly specialized terminology and it's over your head and they don't provide a working definition, that's semantic noise. So to be audience centered, you want to be aware of the highly technical lingo that you use, but you also want to be aware that you're being audience centered and you're not offending your audience. So those are the 4 different types of noise. I have some students on their exam, they'll break all these down, or they'll really dive into the psychological noise that the children experienced in the eye of the storm. That's usually another hot topic with the exam. Context is where the speech communication event is occurring. Is it at a restaurant? Is it at a funeral, right? And whose funeral? Is it your cool grandma who, was a biker and you're at a biker bar? Or is it your very proper grandma and you're at a very socialite kind of event, right? Social context talks about relationships. Do I know this person really well? Did I just meet them? There's going to be a whole different way that we communicate with individuals based on those past relationships. And then we have chronological context. Have any of you ever lent money out and suddenly now there's a completely different vibe in the friendship? Right. So is this conversation we're having before you lent them the $500 or after you lent them the $500? That's the chronological context. And then there's cultural context. This is what I was talking about earlier, is that maybe you do not use eye contact, or maybe you don't use large hand gestures. And I remember one time I was working with a woman who was from a very stout German background. She grew up in New Braunfels. She was much older than I was. And I'm Sicilian. My dad was raised in a big Sicilian extended family. We use big hand gestures. We talk loud. We're not mad at you. That's how we communicate, right? But for her, it came across as aggressive. Okay, there goes I'm losing power. Just a second here. Hold on, y'all. So, that was a different cultural context that we had. She would take that as aggression, and I'm like, this is just how we communicate. Like, when I talk loud, I'm just enthusiastic about something. When I'm using big hand gestures, I'm just like emphasizing. I'm using emphasis, right? I'm emphasizing my words. So it was a different culture, and these are like two Americans, right? This is not even just an international situation with an international speaker. So now, this is a review. So if your internal noise would be psychological noise, where you're thinking about an argument that you had with your best friend this morning, you can't focus on the teacher's lecture. Physiological noise would be maybe you're deaf or hard of hearing. I need to fix this. This is an old slide, and I had a deaf or hard of hearing student. Actually, he was a friend of mine I knew from San Marcos. He was an activist. He said, no, use deaf or hard of hearing. Or it's the language. It's like a semantic noise situation where they're using words that are way above your head, or they're saying something offensive. External noise was that first one. The room is too hot. There's the sound of the train, the telephone. So the last thing I want to talk about in this lecture is ethos, pathos, and logos. That speaker credibility would be ethos. That's how you dress. That's, do you have your PowerPoint all set up? Or are you playing with it right before and you're clearly not prepared, and you used EndNote versus PowerPoint and your computer can't read EndNote? Okay. Emotional appeal is telling that story about someone and the struggles they went through. You're telling us, it becomes very emotional. It could also be your delivery style, quite frankly, right? And then logical appeal is how well organized is that speech or that presentation or that conversation? Are you using evidence to back up your claims? That kind of thing. So, and you can talk about that. You could talk about the Eye of the Storm and how she used emotional appeal when she started talking about, well, brown-eyed people are wasteful. Or she said blue-eyed people are wasteful. Remember when she was doing it by eye color? And so now she's actually making a lot. You could make the argument in your mind: was that emotional appeal? Was that logical appeal? Or was she using her speaker credibility? It's however you want to break that down. Self-concept is the next lecture here, and this self-concept is a really interesting topic. This was always like my trick question on the multiple choice exam, is that self-concept is a subjective description of yourself. Okay. There's a concept, if you look it up, called the Johari window. It's probably in your text somewhere. I can't quote the page number, where it's like a grid. Known to self, known to others. I know I have brown hair. You know I have brown hair. Known to others, not known to self. There may be something about me that you've noticed, and I didn't know I did that. Right? Sometimes it's like a vocal filler. Like, people don't know they go like, or they go when they get nervous. They don't know they're doing that, but you can observe it. So known to others, not known to self. And then there's this whole grid of how they break it down in the Johari window. Now suddenly my optics about myself may be a little different based on just that day. Or it could be a product of your environment. Our self-concept is very subjective. It's our description of who we think we are. This you do not have to memorize. It's very old data, and I'm data driven. This is old data. The takeaway from this slide is oftentimes self-concept influences if students stay in college. That could be a variety of factors. They don't know how to navigate the financial aid system. They don't know that there are tutors to help them. They don't understand that they have to show up to class and not party, right? This happens at Texas State more than it would at ACC, because most of my students at ACC are working and they have families, but at Texas State, they're all partying hardy, right? So they party hardy till 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and then they don't wake up for class, and they don't realize you have to have a schedule in order to make class, and you have to attend class in order to do well in the class. So that's what this is. It's just a lot of data about the importance of self-concept in terms of people's ability to complete student completion ratio. And even says like 75% of the students who drop out of college do so within the first 2 years, and the greatest number of those drop out in the first year. So it's super important to understand those complex forces that impact people who are making academic adjustments. High school is much different than college, right? Like in this class, I'm not giving you guys a ton of daily work, am I? That goes into a major. You have major assignments in this class, right? That's a much different situation of assessment than it would be in like a high school situation. These are the different types of self-concept. If you were in my public speaking class, you would be giving a speech covering all of these. That's what my first assignment for my public speaking students are. They make a PowerPoint, they'll do a poster board, maybe a Prezi, maybe some physical objects where they go break these down. Your physical self-concept is what we can see about you. I remember when I got a new car, and I have this, I'm like a car lady, okay? I love cars. And I've got a Grand Marquis Palm Beach. It's like a cop car. And it's got a V8, and it's a battle. I've gotten in wrecks in it, and I'm not going to fix it. It's like my Mad Max mobile. I used to call it my activism mobile. Everybody knows that car in town because I used to video blog, and you could see the car. So everybody knows that's LMC's activism mobile, right? When I got a new car, they're all like, and it's funny how people look, you got a new, it's a Subaru, you got a new car. Like suddenly their perception of me changed. It was so funny. And I had a second car that someone had given to me because that car didn't have AC, and people felt bad for me. I even got pulled over one time because I literally opened up the door at a stoplight, and the cop pulled me over, and he could see like I was about to pass out, and he let me go, thank goodness. And I mean, you could literally see I was about to pass out. It was like, I don't know, 102 outside. So someone gave me that second car. It was a little small beat up car, but it was great. Great gas mileage. Well, when I got that new car, boy, did people have a different perception of me, right? Sometimes people have had life-changing situations with weight. I remember when I lost about 60 pounds, man, I went from like a, ladies, you probably know the sizes, maybe a size 12, 14 to like a 6. Man, I was in great shape, right? And so it was like a completely different self-concept that I had. I was wearing clothes I'd never worn. I'd never, worn those athletic whatever tights or whatever. And so a lot of times our physical self-concept will drive other aspects of our perception of ourself, our overall self-concept. Then you have the academic self-concept. Now think of it in this two ways. You have a general academic self-concept about how good you are at learning. Right? So like, I love school. I'm a biology major. I'm a kinesiology major. I'm an art major. I'm a comm studies major. But then you have a specific set of content related concepts that you focus on. Some of those could be what you're studying in school. My background is in rhetorical theory and criticism, right? With a specific subset. I studied Black feminist theory, and specifically that within theory, not even like popular culture and activism movements, more like as theory. Chicana theory, all that. This was like years ago, way before critical race theory was even like a popular culture term. And so that was always interesting back then versus now, how those terms were, because I was actually rejected from conferences years ago. It was very funny. And so, but you know what? What am I into right now that I'm always talking about? What is it that I'm always talking about that I'm really into? It's not my papers. I don't write academic papers anymore, do I? Have you guys ever heard me talk about an academic paper I'm working on? My ham radio stuff, right? Didn't I just talk about that last night? How I talked to them on 5 watts? So I am not going to ever teach ham radio, maybe to my friends or something like that. But that, or in photography. Anybody in here, you're learning how to play guitar right now? Thomas, you are, right? Okay, Aaron, and I know, Aaron, you come from a long line of musicians, right? And that's in your blood, like literally. Like he's got a very, very prominent family devotion to music, devotional music. But those are hobbies that you have for self development. And that's part of that academic self concept. So kind of own that. Social self concept is the next one. And that is like, who do you hang out with? Do you hang out with in high school, like back in the day? Like I used to hang out with the debaters, right? Or do you hang out with the football players? Or maybe you're in choir. Maybe you've got just some friends from your neighborhood that you hang out with. So that's just how, like, your group of friends. And then finally, we've got transpersonal self concept. That describes how you relate to the unknown. Okay, so that's your religion, basically. Think of it that way. That's really what that is. It's just another way to say your religion. So you could cover any of those in your conversation. You could cover the social self-concept of the children in the eye of the storm. How as soon as she divided those children up based on eye color, man, their friendships changed. Remember when the one kid said, he said, yeah, remember he said it was really hard for us because that was your best friend who you hung out with outside of school, and it made it even worse when she put those collars on us. Or even like, you were my teacher. Like basically, the bottom line is, he was saying, he didn't say it this way. You were my great teacher, and I was really upset with you as my teacher for putting us through that. All right. You could take an example of like a sports person, and some of these sports people are very faith-based, and how do they what impact does that have on their game? Or maybe sometimes they get blowback as a result of that. Other fans appreciate them calling out, identifying their faith as part of what allows them to achieve excellence. The next one is self-disclosure. Self-disclosure are the different levels of your comfortableness in taking risks, disclosing information about yourself. So for some people, your political views, your religious views, maybe your views on a specific topic may be out there because you're a politician, you're involved in your community, everybody knows your stance on it, right? Level 3 is so for another person, it may be very much level 3. All right, because they're not out in the public eye. And then so it kind of goes up. So what I always say is, why would you not want to drink with your colleagues at work? Yeah, you may start telling personal stuff about yourself, which may be used against you. The more, and you know what? You can even talk about those kids. When those kids bore their soul and how that activity impacted their perception on race and how they felt. Remember how authentic they were as children? Remember when the one kid was ripping up that collar with his teeth, and the other kid was ripping up that collar with his shoes, and then they were talking about their experiences as adults? Remember that? That was all level 3 self-disclosure. It was not biographical information. It was not just icebreaker information. Okay, so you could definitely incorporate that into that. Self-fulfilling prophecy is the mindset that if you feel it and you think it, it's going to come true. So if you say, "Oh, I'm going to do horrible on this speech," then you're going to do horrible on the speech. If you, and remember what I said, the higher performing athletes, and I would also say this in terms of academics or public speaking, feel the stress more. So think to yourself next time, I am high performing. I'm feeling this. This is fight or flight. This is physiological. It's burned into my DNA to make me run faster against the dinosaurs. Now I need to resituate that stress, that this is going to help me perform better. I love giving a speech because I know I'm going to change someone's life, or I love the artistry of the words that I've selected for my speech, or I stand by my research. Right? I love to connect with my audience. I want to inspire or motivate one of my audience members. You should be thinking about those sorts of things when giving your speech, not, I'm going to do horrible. Can you guys ever tell when someone seems like they're about to cry in the middle of a speech. Have you ever seen a speaker do that? I think part of that is breath control. I think part of it is the diaphragm is log jammed and they're not breathing. And I think part of it is they're not channeling. Maybe they don't believe in their speech. That could be another thing. It's like they don't believe in it. I've never seen in my 33, 34 years of teaching a student with high anxiety not nail the speech to the wall because we've picked a topic that they believe in, they've practiced it, and we've worked on it. So based on my own personal experiences, I've never seen a student who self-identifies as having high anxiety or social anxiety or any other sort of situation not be one of my top speakers. I've had multiple debaters when I was a debate coach. One guy could barely talk. And once he had that opportunity to break himself of that, whatever it was going on, he was one of the most like almost aggressive speakers. Like he was really like he went down to the dean's office and complained when they shut down the debate team for the football team. Like that's how he got. Like he was really empowered. He really felt his voice and he wanted to use it. And I've had a student who had epilepsy many years ago. She was a high school student. She says, I'm going to stutter. I stutter every time I get nervous. We practice. Let me tell you, she had had surgical procedures on her brain. That student did not stutter one time during her speech. Now she gives motivational speeches about epilepsy. See if my thing will go over there. The Stanford Prison Guard experiment. Does anybody remember that one from watching a video? Or the movie with Forrest Whitaker? Remember that one? He plays the mean guy. He does a really good job. Like he really does. Remember, that's the one where does anybody not heard of this one in your psychology classes? This is the one. This would be like me if I did this. I was like, okay, half of y'all are going to be the prisoners, and half of y'all are going to be the prison guards, and go. And basically, within like one day, they completely changed the communication context. They put numbers on them. They stripped away their individuality, and it literally became it was so bad that they had to stop the experiment. And the ones who were the prisoners, some of them had mental breakdowns. And the prison guard, a couple of the the fake prison guards, got so into the power hungry, they got pissed off when they shut down the experiment. So it showed very quickly how a communication dynamic can be changed just through communication. Okay. Now, another example of that would be this, and I will never show this example in my class. I will never. Don't pull the video. It's disturbing. I could only watch 30 seconds of it. I don't expose myself to that kind of stuff. But I use it to juxtapose from the Jane Elliott video. This is the one where they told people, I'm going to ask you a question. If you get the question wrong, I'm going to shock someone in another room. And the person in the lab coat kept telling the person answering the question, I'm going to dial up the amperage and they're going to get shocked. And what they found is the closer that the person was to hearing the screams of the person getting shocked, the less likely they were to allow the guy in the lab coat to hit the button to shock the other person. The farther away, the more likely they were allowed to agree to shock the person. The closer they were to the person, the less likely they were to agree to shock the person. The thing about it is no one was getting shocked. It was fake. They would ask a question, like if I asked you a mathematical question, you answered it. I said, Mr. Reyes, you got it wrong. I'm going to shock that person in the other room. Do you agree or not? And then the farther they were, maybe you would agree. Maybe the closer they were, they disagree. It was compliance. It was testing how far people would go. I believe there was one guy who disagreed, and he was an engineer. The problem with this one was that while there was nobody physically getting shocked, it psychologically damaged the people being compliant, allowing the shocking, because a person in an authority figure coat was telling them that's true. Does that remind you of anything today? When authority figures tell you this is true, and maybe you agree with it or you believe it, and maybe it might not be. Think about it. Different things in society that go on, whether it's social media or even news, right? And it could be on all sides of the political continuum. Right now, never before in my 34 years of teaching have I seen such a divided nation. And it's like sometimes I'm wondering like how much of this is true and how much compliance are you getting out of this? So think about that. Think about that experiment when you consider how susceptible people can be to accept something based on it's from authority. That's when we talked about our research, we wanted to make sure we had recent evidence, that we had people who were credible and not hacks, and it could be verified from other sources, right? Or they weren't biased. Now, there's nothing wrong with using a biased source. That's totally, you know, within your purview, but you should be able to have a response to that or have some backup evidence to verify what you're talking about. It's not just from one person, right? So we do that naturally when we're shopping, don't we? You don't just take one review. When I'm buying a new ham radio, I watch 50 videos on the ham radio just to make sure I'm getting like the real deal about that ham radio. We do that as consumers for products when we spend our money. We should do that as consumers of information when we make decisions, whether it's medical decisions. We do that. A lot of people do that before they do a medical procedure, right? So it's just like best practice. I'm going to take this out here and I'm going to move it here. And then I'm going to take out this here. I feel like this is more, covers it.